The Galactic Empire's recruitment broadcast echoed across the stars, transmitted through every known communication channel. It was not an invitation but a challenge. The message began with a chilling statistic. This task has a 99.9% fatality rate. Success will bring wealth, honor, and eternal recognition within the Empire. Failure ensures death. The words hung heavily, underscored by visuals of smoldering alien landscapes, shattered vessels, and the skeletal remains of those who had come before. The Empire's finest warriors, it claimed, had tried and failed. They needed something more, someone reckless or brilliant enough to succeed. On Earth, the response was immediate and unanimous. While alien species across the galaxy recoiled in horror at the challenge, humanity leaned in, intrigued. Earth's military leaders, adventurers, and even private citizens debated the details, but one sentiment rang louder than the rest. This sounds fun. Marcus Kane, the self-appointed leader of humanity's first expedition into the wider galaxy, watched the broadcast with a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. His sharp green eyes tracked every frame, as if dissecting the Empire's plea for help. He was in his mid-30s, his face a patchwork of small scars that hinted at a life lived dangerously, yet successfully. He sat at the head of a table in the Orion, Earth's first interstellar warship, surrounded by his hand-picked team. Ethan Steele, the team's tactician, leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his buzzed blonde hair. "They're desperate," he said, his voice tinged with amusement. "Broadcasting galaxy-wide? You only do that when you've run out of options." Drake Holloway, the ship's engineer, let out a low whistle as the visuals displayed a planet wreathed in acid storms and teeming with monstrous, alien predators. "Cravo 7, he murmured, reading the data aloud. "Gravity fluxes, hostile wildlife, environmental hazards off the charts. And they want us to go there." Victor Cross, the team's marksman, shifted in his seat, his arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried a hint of anticipation. "It's a challenge," he said simply. Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm yet commanding. "It's more than that. It's an opportunity. They think it's impossible. They think we'll fail like the rest of them." His smirk widened into a grin. "Let's prove them wrong." The room fell silent as his words sunk in. Then Ethan laughed, breaking the tension. "You're insane, Marcus. And yet you're still here," Marcus replied. The team was well aware of the risks, but none of them hesitated. Humanity's introduction to the galactic stage had been recent, but their reputation was growing rapidly. Other species called them reckless, overly aggressive, and disturbingly inventive. Humans wore the insults like badges of honor. The Empire's representatives were less enthusiastic. When Marcus submitted Earth's application for the task, the initial response was stunned silence. Then came the questions. "You understand the conditions of Cravo 7, an Empire official asked, his voice clipped and incredulous. His holographic projection flickered in the briefing room of the Orion. The alien, a tall, willowy creature with translucent skin and glowing blue eyes, regarded Marcus and his team with something bordering on pity. Marcus nodded. "We've reviewed the data. We're ready." "Your species has no precedent for missions of this magnitude," the official countered. "You lack the experience. We'll manage," Marcus interrupted, his tone sharp but not disrespectful. "Unless you're planning to tell the entire galaxy the Empire turned down the only volunteers willing to take this on." The alien hesitated, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Very well," he said finally. "But understand this. Failure will not be seen as bravery. It will be seen as proof of humanity's hubris." "Noted," Marcus said with a grin. With that, the team was officially authorized to undertake what was now being referred to as the elite task. Preparations began immediately. Ethan pored over the Empire's data, mapping out possible routes through Cravo 7's shifting terrain. Drake worked tirelessly in the ship's engineering bay, fine-tuning their equipment for the planet's extreme conditions. Victor spent hours in the simulation room, practicing his aim against projections of Kravos 7's known predators. Despite the gravity of the mission, the team's camaraderie never wavered. In the mess hall one evening, Drake voiced what they were all thinking. "You realize they're betting on us dying, right?" Marcus shrugged. "Let them. It'll make success that much sweeter." Victor smirked. "They'll probably write it off as a fluke." "They can call it whatever they want," Ethan said, raising a glass. "As long as we walk away alive." When the day of departure arrived, the Empire arranged a small ceremony to mark the occasion. It was more of a formality than a celebration. No one expected the humans to return. Marcus stood at the forefront, his team behind him, as the Empire's ambassador addressed the gathered crowd. "Today," the ambassador began, "we witness an act of bravery, or perhaps folly, unlike any we have seen before. The human species, new to our galactic community, has volunteered for a task that has defeated even the most seasoned among us. While their optimism is commendable, let us temper it with realism. The odds are not in their favor." Marcus stepped forward, cutting the speech short. "Thank you for the vote of confidence," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He glanced back at his team, then out at the crowd. "We'll see when we get back." The ambassador bristled, but Marcus didn't care. He had no interest in speeches or ceremonies. This was about the mission, and about proving humanity's worth to the galaxy. As the Orion lifted off, leaving the Empire's capital behind, Marcus felt a surge of anticipation. This wasn't just about survival. It was about making a statement. "Set course for Kravos 7, he ordered, his voice steady. Ethan punched in the coordinates, the hum of the engines rising as the ship prepared for hyperspace. "Everyone ready?" Marcus asked, glancing around the bridge. Drake grinned. "Born ready." Victor nodded silently, checking his weapon one last time. Ethan smirked. "Let's show them what humans can do." As the Orion jumped to light speed, Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression one of quiet determination. He knew the risks. He knew the odds. But he also knew one simple truth. Humans thrived where others faltered. And this time would be no different. The Orion broke through the atmosphere of Kravos 7, its reinforced hull groaning under the strain of violent winds and razor-sharp acid rain. The view from the cockpit was a kaleidoscope of chaos. Green lightning crackled across an ash-gray sky, and below stretched an endless expanse of jagged cliffs, bubbling tar pits, and rivers that glowed with a menacing bioluminescence. Drake Holloway, hunched over his engineering console, muttered a curse. "This planet's trying to kill us before we even touch the ground. That's why we've got you, isn't it?" Marcus Kane replied, without looking up from the controls. His hands moved with practiced precision, keeping the ship steady despite the turbulence. Drake snorted but didn't take his eyes off the readings. "Yeah, well, don't get cocky. These systems weren't built to handle this kind of abuse." "Noted," Marcus said dryly. Ethan Steele stood behind Marcus, arms crossed, studying the terrain through the cockpit's reinforced glass. "Landing zone's going to be tight. Those cliffs look like they're moving." "They are," Victor Cross said from his post at the weapons station. He zoomed in on the cliffs, revealing the unsettling truth. The rocky formations were covered in enormous, slow-moving creatures that blended seamlessly with the terrain. "Living mountains," Ethan muttered. "Great. Anything else we should know?" Victor scanned further and froze. "Yeah. Swarm incoming. 10 o'clock. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Brace yourselves." The ship's automated systems blared a warning as the swarm came into view. Hundreds of winged predators, each the size of a small fighter craft, their serrated wings slicing through the storm like knives. The Drakthal had arrived. "Evasive maneuvers," Marcus ordered. The Orion veered sharply, engines roaring as it banked to avoid the first wave of attackers. The creatures screeched, their cries reverberating through the hull as they circled back for another pass. "Shields holding, but not for long," Drake said, his voice tight. "Victor, light them up," Marcus commanded. Victor grinned, his fingers flying over the controls. The ship's forward cannons erupted in a blaze of plasma fire, cutting through the swarm with surgical precision. Explosions lit up the sky as several Dracthyl disintegrated mid-flight, but more kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. "They're adapting," Ethan said, watching the creatures shift their formation to avoid the cannon fire. "We're not going to win this in the air." "We don't need to," Marcus said. "Drake, find me a landing spot." Drake's eyes darted across his console. "There's a clearing about 2 clicks west, but it's not exactly ideal." "Define not ideal," Marcus said. "Acid pools, unstable ground, and, oh, great, more of those cliff crawlers." Marcus's jaw tightened. "It'll have to do. Hang on." The Orion dived sharply, the Dracthyl hot on its tail. Marcus pushed the engines to their limit, weaving through the storm with an almost reckless confidence. The ship rattled violently as it neared the ground, the clearing coming into view through the haze. "Landing gear deployed," Drake said, his hands a blur as he worked to stabilize the systems. "Victor, keep them off us," Marcus barked. Victor didn't reply. He was too busy firing, the ship's turrets swiveling to fend off the relentless swarm. Explosions rocked the air as more of the creatures fell, but it was clear they were outnumbered. With a bone-jarring thud, the Orion touched down. Marcus killed the engines and unbuckled his harness in one fluid motion. "Drake, keep the ship running. We might need a quick exit." Ethan, Victor, with me. The ramp lowered, and the team stepped out into the clearing, weapons at the ready. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur and something metallic, and the ground beneath their boots hissed as the acid rain fell. The Dracthyl screeched overhead, but they seemed hesitant to approach the ground. Marcus scanned the area, his instincts on high alert. "Why aren't they following us?" Victor asked, his rifle trained on the sky. "They're smart," Ethan said, his eyes narrowing. "They know something we don't." As if on cue, the ground beneath them shuddered. Marcus barely had time to shout a warning before the earth split open, and a massive, spiked appendage erupted from the ground. It belonged to a creature buried beneath the surface, its body hidden but its intent clear. They were intruders. "Move!" Marcus yelled, diving out of the way as the appendage slammed down where he'd been standing. Ethan rolled to his feet, firing a burst from his plasma rifle at the exposed limb. The shots left scorch marks but didn't slow the creature down. "Victor, take it out!" Marcus ordered. Victor dropped to one knee, his rifle steady despite the trembling ground. He fired a single shot, the projectile piercing the appendage with a sickening crunch. The creature let out a deafening roar and retreated into the earth, but Marcus knew it wouldn't stay gone for long. "We're sitting ducks out here," Ethan said, his voice tight. Marcus pointed to the cliffs on the far side of the clearing. "We make for the rocks." "Move!" The team sprinted across the uneven ground, the acid pools hissing ominously as they passed. Another appendage burst from the ground, narrowly missing Ethan, but they didn't stop. They reached the cliffs, the towering formations providing some shelter from the rain and the Dracthyl overhead. Marcus leaned against the rock, catching his breath as he scanned the area. "Status?" he asked. "Alive," Ethan said, though his voice was laced with frustration. "Barely," Drake added over the comms. "The ship's not going to hold up to this environment for long. You'd better find whatever it is we're looking for fast." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. The job had barely begun, and already the planet was living up to its reputation. But he wasn't about to back down. "This is nothing," he said, more to himself than anyone else. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Nothing?" Marcus grinned. "We've faced worse." Victor didn't reply, but a faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Ethan, however, was less amused. "I hope you're right," he said, peering into the distance, "because this place isn't going to give us a break." Marcus followed his gaze and felt his grin fade. In the distance, barely visible through the rain, was a structure. It was ancient and alien, Its design unlike anything they'd seen before. That's it, Marcus said, his voice steady. Ethan frowned. How do you know? Call it a hunch, Marcus said. The team exchanged glances, but no one argued. They had a mission to complete, and Marcus wasn't about to let anything, Dractho, acid rain, or whatever else this planet had in store, stand in their way. As they began their trek toward the structure, the storm intensified, the wind howling like a living thing. Marcus tightened his grip on his weapon, his every sense alert. The rain was unrelenting, each drop sizzling on contact with the team's armored suits as they made their way toward the ancient structure. The ground was treacherous, shifting with every step, as if the planet itself was trying to swallow them whole. Marcus Kane led the way, his rifle held at the ready, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement. This place is a nightmare, Ethan muttered, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. You're not wrong, Victor replied, his tone calm but his grip on his weapon tight. Stay sharp. As they approached the structure, its full scale became apparent. The building was colossal, its jagged spires reaching toward the storm-laden sky. The surface was covered in alien glyphs that pulsed faintly, as though alive. The air around it was thick, humming with a strange energy that made the hair on the back of Marcus's neck stand on end. Anyone else getting a bad feeling about this? Drake's voice crackled over the comms from the ship. Just focus on keeping the Orion running, Marcus said. We've got this. Sure you do, Drake muttered. Ethan stepped closer to one of the glyphs, his curiosity overriding his caution. These markings, they're not just decorative. They're a language. A warning, maybe. Can you read them? Marcus asked. Ethan shook his head. Not without more time. And something tells me we don't have much of that. Marcus nodded. Then we keep moving. They found an entrance at the base of the structure, a massive archway that loomed like the gaping maw of some ancient beast. The interior was dark, but the faint glow of the glyphs provided just enough light to reveal a narrow corridor that stretched into the depths of the building. Stay close, Marcus said, stepping inside. The air was colder here, carrying a metallic tang that made every breath feel heavy. The walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with the glyphs, as if the entire structure was alive. This place gives me the creeps, Victor said, his voice low. Ethan smirked. That's probably the point. They moved in silence, their footsteps echoing off the smooth, alien stone. The corridor twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the structure. Every so often, they passed what looked like statues. Hulking figures carved from the same material as the walls, their faces obscured by intricate helmets. Guardians, Victor said, his voice tinged with unease. Let's hope they stay statues, Marcus replied. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling disappearing into darkness. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and atop it rested a small, glowing artifact. The light it emitted was soft yet piercing, casting strange shadows on the walls. That's it, Marcus said, his voice steady. Ethan frowned. How do you know? Because it's the only thing in here worth guarding, Marcus replied. The team approached cautiously, their weapons at the ready. The air grew heavier with each step, the energy emanating from the artifact pressing down on them like an invisible weight. Whatever this thing is, it's powerful, Ethan said, his voice strained. And dangerous, Victor added. Marcus reached the pedestal and studied the artifact. It was a small, crystalline object, its surface shifting and shimmering as if it contained a living galaxy. He didn't hesitate. Reaching out, he grasped it firmly. The moment his fingers closed around it, the entire chamber trembled. Marcus, what did you do? Ethan demanded, his voice rising. Before Marcus could respond, the statues lining the walls came to life. Their eyes glowed a deep red as they stepped forward, their movements slow but deliberate. Each one held a massive weapon that crackled with energy. Guardians, Victor said grimly, raising his rifle. Fall back, Marcus ordered. The team retreated toward the corridor, firing as they moved. The Guardians advanced relentlessly, their weapons discharging bursts of energy that scorched the walls and floor. One of the blasts narrowly missed Marcus, the heat singing the air around him. "These things don't go down easy," Victor said, his shots barely slowing the nearest Guardian. "Then we don't fight them," Marcus said. "We outrun them. Move." They sprinted down the corridor, the sound of the Guardians' heavy footsteps echoing behind them. The glyphs on the walls pulsed faster now, their light growing brighter as if the structure itself was reacting to the intrusion. Drake's voice came over the comms, panicked. "What's going on in there?" "The ship's picking up massive energy surges. We've got company," Marcus replied. "Prep for immediate departure." "Easier said than done," Drake shot back. "This storm's getting worse." "We'll deal with it," Marcus said. "Just be ready." The team emerged from the structure into the storm, the rain falling harder than before. The Drakthol were still circling overhead, but their attention seemed divided now, their screeches mingling with the distant roars of the Guardians. "We're pinned between a swarm and a death squad," Ethan said, his voice tight. "Then we make a path," Marcus said. Victor took position, his rifle trained on the approaching Guardians. "Go. I'll cover you. No one's staying behind," Marcus said firmly. Victor smirked. "Didn't plan on it. Just don't waste a head start." Marcus nodded, leading the team toward the Orion. The Guardians were slower in the open, their massive forms struggling to navigate the uneven terrain. Victor fired a precise shot, hitting one of them in the knee joint and causing it to stumble. "That won't hold them for long," Ethan said, glancing over his shoulder. "It doesn't have to," Marcus replied. "Drake, lower the ramp." The Orion's ramp descended, and the team scrambled aboard. The ship's engines roared to life as Marcus slid into the pilot's seat. "Strap in," he ordered. The Drakthol dug toward the ship, but the Orion's turrets roared to life, cutting them down before they could reach their target. The Guardians, undeterred, raised their weapons and fired. Energy blasts slammed into the ship's shields, causing the entire vessel to shudder. "Shields at 40%. Drake shouted. "Hold them," Marcus said, gripping the controls. The Orion lifted off, the storm raging around it. The Guardians continued to fire, their shots growing more erratic as the ship gained altitude. "Punch it," Ethan yelled. Marcus didn't need to be told twice. He engaged the thrusters, and the Orion shot into the sky, leaving Kravo 7's deadly surface behind. As they broke through the atmosphere, the team let out a collective sigh of relief. But Marcus's grip on the controls remained tight. "That was too easy," he muttered. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Easy? Were we on the same planet?" Marcus didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the artifact, now secured in a containment field. Whatever it was, it had nearly gotten them killed, and it wasn't done yet. Victor leaned back in his seat, his expression unreadable. "So what's the plan now?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "We find out what this thing is, and we figure out why the Empire was willing to risk everything for it." The others exchanged uneasy glances but didn't argue. The mission wasn't over, not by a long shot. As the Orion jumped to hyperspace, the artifact pulsed faintly, its light casting eerie shadows across the cabin. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface of the danger they were in. "Buckle up," he said, his voice low. "It's going to get worse before it gets better." The Orion emerged from hyperspace into the relative calm of a distant star system, its engines groaning under the strain of the jump. The once pristine hull was scorched and pitted, evidence of their brutal escape from Kravo 7. Inside, the crew sat in tense silence, their adrenaline finally ebbing but leaving exhaustion and unease in its wake. Marcus Kane leaned back in the pilot's chair, his eyes fixed on the artifact secured in the containment field at the center of the room. The crystalline object pulsed with an almost hypnotic rhythm, casting shifting shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. It hadn't stopped glowing since they retrieved it, its energy a constant, unsettling presence. Whatever that thing is, it's not just some treasure, Victor said, breaking the silence. He stood near the containment unit, arms crossed, his expression grim. Treasure doesn't wake up death squads, Ethan added, pacing the small cabin. His usual bravado was muted, his movements restless. And it doesn't send an entire planet's ecosystem into overdrive. That thing is alive. I'm telling you, alive. Drake's voice crackled over the comms from the engine room. Great, because what we really needed was a sentient cosmic nightmare on board. Marcus ignored the banter, his focus unyielding. We need answers, and we need them now. Ethan stopped pacing and turned to him. And where exactly are we supposed to get those? The Empire sure as hell didn't give us any hints. Victor stepped closer to the containment field, his gaze narrowing. We could try interacting with it. See if it responds. That's the worst idea you've had in months, Drake called out from the comms. What if it fries the ship? Or worse, fries us? Victor shrugged. If it wanted us dead, we wouldn't have made it off that planet. Whatever it is, it let us take it. That doesn't mean we should start poking it, Ethan said, his tone sharp. Marcus stood, his movements deliberate. Victor's right. This thing didn't destroy us when it had the chance. But we need to be careful. Ethan, prep the scanner. Drake, I want the engines on standby. If this thing goes sideways, we're jumping out of here. Copy that. Drake replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't thrilled about it. Ethan moved to the ship's scanner, activating the system with a few quick taps on the console. A soft hum filled the cabin as the equipment calibrated. Ready when you are, he said. Marcus nodded and stepped closer to the containment field. The artifact's pulsing seemed to quicken as he approached, its glow intensifying. He hesitated, then placed a gloved hand on the edge of the field, just close enough to feel the faint warmth radiating from the object. The moment his hand hovered there, the artifact reacted. Its light flared, filling the room with a blinding brilliance. The hum of the scanner grew louder, its readings spiking wildly. Marcus stepped back. Ethan shouted, shielding his eyes. But Marcus couldn't move. He felt a presence pressing against his mind, a weightless yet undeniable force that wasn't hostile, but wasn't entirely benign either. It was as if the artifact was searching him, peeling back layers of thought and memory with an almost clinical precision. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light dimmed. The artifact returned to its steady pulse, and Marcus stumbled back, gasping for breath. Marcus! Ethan was at his side in an instant, steadying him. What the hell just happened? Marcus shook his head, trying to clear the fog in his mind. It spoke to me? Victor frowned. Spoke? How? Not in words, Marcus said, his voice hoarse. It was images, emotions. It showed me things. A war. Entire civilizations wiped out. And then he trailed off, his gaze fixed on the artifact. And then it asked me a question. What kind of question? Ethan asked, his tone wary. Marcus looked at him, his expression unreadable. It asked if I was willing to fight. The cabin fell silent. Victor's jaw tightened, and Ethan's pacing resumed, his movements more agitated than before. And what did you say? Victor asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He glanced at the artifact, its glow steady and unyielding, before meeting Victor's gaze. I said yes. Ethan let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair. You said yes? Just like that? We don't even know what this thing is, Marcus. I didn't have a choice, Marcus said, his voice firm. Whatever this is, it's bigger than us. Bigger than the Empire. If we don't act, it won't matter what we think. There won't be anyone left to argue. Drake's voice cut through the tension. Hate to interrupt, but we've got company. Sensors are picking up multiple ships inbound, and they're not friendly. Empire? Marcus asked, already moving to the pilot's seat. Looks like it, Drake confirmed. They must have tracked us. Damn it. Victor muttered, gripping his rifle. Marcus brought the Orion systems online, his fingers flying over the controls. Everyone to stations. We're not letting them take this thing. The team moved quickly, their exhaustion forgotten in the face of the imminent threat. The Orion's engines roared to life as Marcus guided the ship into a defensive position. The Empire's ships dropped out of hyperspace, sleek and menacing. Their weapons charged immediately, and a voice crackled over the comms. "This is Captain Rao of the Imperial Fleet. Surrender the artifact, and your lives will be spared. Resist, and you will be destroyed." Marcus smirked, his hands steady on the controls. "Victor, you hear that? They think they've got us." Victor grinned, his fingers dancing over the weapon systems. "Let's show them otherwise." The Orion moved with surprising agility, darting through the void as plasma bolts lit up the darkness. Victor returned fire, his shots precise and unrelenting. Ethan worked at the scanner, his face lit by the glow of the console. "Marcus, the artifact's energy is spiking again. I think it's reacting to the fight. Can you control it?" Marcus asked, dodging another barrage of fire. Ethan shook his head. "I don't even know what it's doing, let alone how to control it." The artifact pulsed brighter, its light filling the cabin. Then, without warning, a beam of energy erupted from the containment field, slicing through the nearest Imperial ship like a knife through paper. The remaining ships hesitated, their formation faltering. "Looks like it's fighting back," Victor said, his tone both impressed and uneasy. Marcus didn't take his eyes off the controls. "Good. Let's give it some cover. Drake, plot us a course out of here." "Already on it," Drake replied. The Orion weaved through the chaos, the artifact's energy continuing to lash out at their attackers. One by one, the Imperial ships fell, their sleek forms reduced to smoldering wreckage. When the last ship was destroyed, the artifact's light dimmed once more, its energy retreating as quickly as it had surged. Marcus guided the Orion away from the battlefield, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Ethan slumped into a seat, his breathing heavy. "That thing just saved our asses." "Yeah," Victor said, his gaze fixed on the artifact. "But at what cost?" Marcus didn't respond immediately. His mind was racing, replaying the images the artifact had shown him. The war, the destruction, the question. "We're not done," he said finally, his voice steady. "Not by a long shot." The team exchanged uneasy glances, but didn't argue. They all knew the truth. Whatever they'd gotten themselves into, it was far from over. The Orion disappeared into the depths of space, the artifact's light pulsing faintly, a reminder of the fight still to come.